Not every nation will feel able to contribute, but that can't mean that we sit back. Instead, those willing will intensify planning now with real urgency. The UK is prepared to back this with boots on the ground and planes in the air, together with others. Europe must do the heavy lifting.
OK, joining me now is Bloomberg's Oliver Crook for the details. What has changed as a result, Ollie, of this summit? What new details do we have at this point?
Yeah, well, listen, Tom, I think the reality of the situation is we do not have a firm plan from the Europeans in terms of what they're going to be able to put up after what we saw on Friday in the Oval Office, which, of course, was one of the most sort of surprising and shocking things, frankly, I've seen in a very long time covering news. And I think it was certainly the reaction from many European leaders. I mean, we heard from, the German foreign minister who said that a new era of barbarity has become an era of barbarity in which the rule-based international order, rule of law must be defended themselves. Kaja Kallas says basically we need a new leader of the free world, and that needs to be coming out of Europe now. And the question is, what is that backstop by? When we talk about a coalition of the willing, as the UK is talking about, as Emmanuel Macron is talking about, what are we talking about? We're talking about potentially putting troops into Ukraine, right? What does that mean? Does that mean frontline troops that will be firing back at Russian troops if a ceasefire is violated? In that case, there is basically no way that the Europeans are going to do that without the American backstop, which is, by the way, exactly what Ukraine has been trying to sort of get from Donald Trump from the very beginning. I think that what is even sort of more in question now at this point, and this was telling from our interview with Alexander Stubb, the president of Finland, was that, it's not just a question of Ukraine. There is potentially question about whether the United States is backing NATO. Have a listen to what he had to say.
When it comes to bilateral alliances and actually regional alliances, so the relationship with Finland to the U.S., we do icebreakers, defense and technology, or when it comes to NATO, that's where we need to be steadfast with the Americans and say that, listen, the alternative cost of pulling out of NATO means that the U.S. is going to lose its status as a superpower. So I'm still hopeful that we can work with the Americans. I don't think we should give up hope.
So when the president of Finland is saying they're still hopeful they can work with the Americans, I mean, this is a real sort of shift in this sort of conversation. We're moving now in the European consciousness away from the sort of theory of what American abandonment looks like and towards the practice of what American abandonment looks like. So, again, for these Europeans, the question is, can you put something together? Can you put something on paper that involves a huge amount of money? Because that is really what Europe can bring to the table. Bring it to President Trump and try to get him and his buy-in to basically security guarantees for Ukraine. We'll have to see. Again, this is sort of, we didn't get that much concrete from this meeting. They're going to reconvene the EU leaders in Brussels on Thursday, and hopefully they're going to put potentially another 20 billion euro package forward. But again, the question is money, and that if we learn anything from Donald Trump, money is just not going to cut it. You need to show some muscle.
And whatever you think of the diplomatic jousting and Zelenskyy's role in that conversation, that, as you say, was dramatic, of course, on Friday, a couple of key truths came through, which is that this is a US president who's attacking the president and the leader of Ukraine, whilst also defending Vladimir Putin of Russia. We hear that Zelensky is prepared to go back to the White House. The US is suggesting he needs to apologise. What is the latest on that?
Yeah, I mean, listen, he said that basically the minerals deal is on the table. They're ready to sign it. But again, what it comes down to is basically what the Ukrainians don't want is to just create the conditions for Russia to rearm, to rebuild its army, and then basically move in again. So if without those backstops, it is very difficult for the Ukrainians to sign on to something that doesn't feel that they are just basically ensuring their just later demise. I mean, I don't know how you really you move forward with that. That fundamentally is the question here for Zelensky and his willingness. I think that there's another question here, right, which is this increasingly, as we heard over the weekend from different members of the U.S. government, they're saying that is Zelensky somebody we can do business with? This puts into question an even bigger question of basically if the U.S. is going to be willing to work with Zelensky. Zelensky, for his part, no, he has not apologized, but he has said he's willing to come to the table and discuss. For the Trump administration, are they going to increasingly insist that he is not the person that they negotiate with, in which case you have a very bizarre situation in which the United States is basically seeming to be taking at least the Russian perspective on the events and potentially asking to basically replace the leader of Ukraine, which is something the Russians in their sort of wildest imagination would never have been able to succeed in doing. Again, we're still pretty early. We're still diagnosing something that was really, I have to say, very sort of dramatic on Friday, and we'll have to see where it goes. And again, the European response to this so far, again, strong rhetoric, but strong rhetoric has not been lacking in Europe. What they need is guns, ammunition, and the funding to pay for all of it.